The best of Money Matters. The Hot Seat.
Welcome to The Hot Seat. I'm your host, Hongbin Jeong. With rising concerns about mental health, online harassment, and peer pressure, bullying remains a persistent issue in schools here in Singapore. A student suffering a rupture in her right eardrum after her schoolmates repeatedly slapped and hit her for 20 minutes. A secondary school boys taunting a fellow student at the void deck of a housing board flat. A student allegedly ostracized as bullies forced other students to avoid her. Now, these are all examples of bullying incidents that have happened here in Singapore. But who should take the lead in addressing these? Since bullying often happens on school grounds, during school hours, and among peers, should schools lead anti-bullying efforts? On the other hand, while schools do play a big role, we can also argue that the foundational values and emotional resilience of a child begin at home. So since parents are a child's first educators, should they be responsible instead for countering bullying? If not, is there a better way forward for both parents and schools to work together to create a safe environment where children can thrive socially and academically without being afraid? Well, before we hear from our guests and dive deeper into this debate, here's a disclaimer. The views and arguments presented by our interviewees do not necessarily reflect their personal beliefs or opinions. Instead, they are here to provide a fresh perspective on the topic at hand. Without further ado, let me introduce our guests who will be sharing their perspectives on this pressing topic. Joining us today is Colin Toh, who is the counselor from Nook Counselling and Therapy, to share with us why the responsibility lies with the school. And we also have Assistant Professor Shan, who is from the National Institute of Education's Psychology and Child and Human Development, who will argue it is the responsibility of the parent to counter bullying. Welcome to the show, both.
Hi, thank you for having us.
Thank you so much for joining us. Well, just to start off, what does bullying look like in schools right now? And is it serious enough that someone needs to step in? Maybe, Shan, we can start off with you.
Yeah, so bullying is actually a global phenomenon. It's seen in every school, in every country. It's not just specific to Singapore. So just because of how prevalent it is, it warrants a lot of attention from families, from educators, just so that we give the proper support to all that's involved in the bullying relationship.
Right, Colin?
Right, adding on to what Shan has said, right, it's also a bit more complex and nuanced these days because it takes place a lot in digital spaces. So sometimes people can, tagging everyone except for one person in a funny meme, right? Or maybe kids can post something hurtful on their WhatsApp status. It's not as obvious, we're not name-calling necessarily. So these things can be a lot more layered.
Right. Yeah. Well, just looking at some data here, last year the Ministry of Education had reported that the average number of bullying incidents had remained steady over the last 5 years. Now, for every 1,000 students, there were an average of 2 incidents in primary schools and 6 incidents in secondary schools annually for any form of bullying, both within and outside of school. So, Colin, can a school with hundreds or thousands of students reasonably monitor every interaction? I mean, if not, isn't there a limit to what the school can do?
Right. So I think, of course, right, it's not realistic to expect schools to do the monitoring. That being said, I think I see schools as tree trunks for communities, where almost every young person passes through during their formative years. So schools are uniquely primed, I guess, to have a bit of responsibility in terms of dealing with bullying, for sure, yeah.
Right. Well, Shan, if parents are the main line of defense here, then why do bullying behaviors surface when students are in school settings, when they're unsupervised by their parents? I mean, shouldn't schools be more accountable in that way for the social environment they manage daily, given kids are in school more than half a day sometimes?
Yeah. So certainly, but, schools provide, the context for school bullying to happen, right? Just because, children spend a lot of time in school and, it's a congregation of a lot of peers in a single space. You have those things, you have bullying, right? Even if it's outside of the school context or inside of the school context. I do feel that, but school culture is really made up of individual students, and each of them will bring with them their attachment or relationship histories from the home, how they see relationship and how they even handle relationships with their peers.
Definitely. Well, I mean, earlier this year, a case surfaced online which raised concerns about a school's failure to protect its students. Looks like a 15-year-old girl from a secondary school died by suicide back in 2023 after she allegedly faced bullying and fell into depression. Now, according to the Facebook post by her mother, despite repeated reports to the principal and school management in 2021 by both the parents, the bullying was allegedly dismissed, with the school labeling the girl as needy and her mother as a complainer. And unfortunately, ostracized by peers and unsupported by the school, the daughter's mental health declined, leading to her death before she turned 16. So, Colin, if schools are supposed to be the primary line of defense against bullying, how do you explain cases like this where, school authorities were informed but still failed to act? I mean, what happens when the very institution we trust to protect students becomes part of the problem? Who steps in then?
Right. So I want to start by saying that I'm not privy to the details of what has happened behind the scenes, so I cannot speak to that. But I think cases like this point to something important, right? Which is what systems are actually in place when a student speaks up and reports to someone. So, oftentimes when a student tells the teacher, where does the information go, right? Does it stop there? Does it move up to level head? Does it go to the principal? And then from there on, does it get flagged to the ministry? I think a lot of that is very opaque. Then that's personally that kind of issue. And I also have a personal, I wonder about this all the time, right? If a school is perceived as problematic when they report bullying cases, could that be seen as a reflection of the leadership of the principal? Could that, maybe the teacher's effectiveness as well, right? And if that perception exists, would that trickle down and create a culture where even students might feel like there's no need for me to kind of report this?
Right. Well, then, Shan, in regards to this case here, the mother repeatedly reported the bullying, right? But what else could a parent realistically do when the school chose to ignore her? I mean, if a parent does everything right, but the school still dismisses them, shouldn't the blame lie with the institution and not the family?
Yeah, I mean, like Colin, we don't have much details about the specific case that you raised, but I feel that any bullying situation is always very heartbreaking for parents, for the victim themselves, and also for teachers, right, who care a lot about their students. I believe that, focusing on solutions about, people often ask, like, what are some of the things, the consequences on the bullies, right? But I feel that what is also as important is the here and now, like what kind of emotional support that our parents or partners in the community, teachers are able to provide to the student alongside consequences or alongside preventive measures. I think that is really important.
Definitely. Well, now in response to the case, then Education Minister Tan Chun Sing urged parents to let schools handle, fighting or bullying cases and avoid speculating or stepping in. He also noted that impulsive reactions such as amplifying one-sided perspectives or undermining school authority can have long-term negative consequences. Well, on that note, it looks like we have a Facebook comment by Neil, and he says that it starts at home with parents. Parental duties and a young person's basic civics education cannot be outsourced. So adding on to that, I mean, Shan, parents don't really control school culture, disciplinary systems, or peer dynamics, though. Yeah. So if they do get involved, isn't there a real risk in their, involvement based on partial information? I mean, couldn't that actually escalate or misdirect the response?
Right. I mean, I totally agree with the comment that was just given online. And, it's really not about intervention when things start to happen. Okay. Right? A lot of this education or whatnot can happen from a very young age, building relationship with the child, having the emotional connection, being the trusted adult in their lives so that they can turn to parents for support and for advice and guidance when things don't go right in the school context, or, just having that kind of guidance so that they know that there are other ways to manage peer relationship instead of turning to aggression. So all these things can be cultivated from a very young age. We don't have to think about intervention as when a bullying situation happens, let's do something about it.
Right.
Yeah.
Sure, it should be before. I mean, there all comes with development here. Well, Colin, but if, let's say, parents rely solely on the school to fix everything, aren't they turning a blind eye to their own role in shaping their child's values, resilience, and emotional well-being, like Shan has just mentioned there? I mean, wouldn't they be left to just blame the system when things go wrong?
Right. So I think that we as a society can become a bit obsessed with blame and accountability, right? Constantly asking, whose responsibility is this? Whose turf is this? Where do we draw the line? It's something that's very prevalent in corporate culture, right? And again, it feels like parents are running their family like a business, like a company. And you can't run the school that way either, right? It's not like, I just want to report this bullying so that someone else is involved and then, I'm absolved of any kind of responsibility. So I think, yes. So then my question would be, what if instead of blaming a single institution, we start to look at it as if it is a collective responsibility, right? So I think like what Hui Shan is just adding on to that, maybe it can be an ecosystem where the government is involved, law enforcement's there, community agencies as well, maybe even peer networks, of course with the parents as well.
Right. Well, I mean, bullying is not just about like physical altercation, things that happens at school. Now it's gone on social media, on technology. I mean, although official reports to the Ministry of Education have suggested that bullying cases have kind of remained stable over the past decade, experts warn that teenage bullying is evolving and worsening with the rise of social media and messaging apps. Technology has not only created new avenues for psychological harm, but has also amplified physical bullying by bringing disturbing incidents into the public eye. I think in 2024 alone, multiple videos surfaced online, including one showing a primary student, being punched, and another of a secondary student being kicked and taunted at a void deck by a group of boys, all which have been recorded and uploaded on social media. So, Colin, given that bullying often takes subtle social or even digital forms that teachers might never, witness, how realistic is it to expect schools to catch every case in time?
Right. So, again, I want to start by saying that I have a lot of empathy for teachers, right? So they're not just doing the teaching, they're running CCAs, they're managing events, handling administrative work, speaking with parents. And in some cases, they're expected to step in as counselors as well. So it's not realistic, you're right. It's not realistic to monitor this. But then again, I think if we look at bullying and how realistic is it to catch these cases in time, right? I think if we look at it from that frame, it is quite reductive. It becomes like something like, okay, you broke a rule, therefore I have to catch you, right? And that's not really the kind of conversation that we should be having.
Right. Well, I also understand that MOE gives teachers cyber wellness training and even strengthens senior teachers' ability to handle complex bullying, especially with the rise of technology here. So, Hui Shan, if schools already provide this kind of support, shouldn't they be the primary defenders against bullying instead of parents?
Yeah, I think it's important, right, for us to do that kind of teacher preparation, right, so that any teacher who goes into the classroom, they know how to handle situations, because after all, they would be the first adult responders. But at the same time, bullying is such a complex issue, right? The work doesn't just stop at intervening at the school level. But at the same time, if we are able to harness the kind of resources and support that the families can give, and even community partners, right, that would make things a lot better. So it's like there is a unified message that is delivered to the students that, look, bullying is not sanctioned. We don't condone these behaviors. But at the same time, if you are bullied, there are resources that you can turn to, not just in the school, but there are many avenues. You choose your pick. Who do you trust the most, right? The trusted adults are available to support you.
The resources that are already out there. Some children, they fear the possibility of retaliation from bullies and do not report such incidents of bullying. So, Colin, I believe MOE understands that there are concerns about whether students report bullying incidents. So, if schools are supposed to be a safe space here, why aren't students coming forward? Isn't this something that needs to be addressed first at home through the trust with parents?
Right. So I think in addition to what we discussed about the perception of safety in school, there can be other reasons why students don't step forward, right? And this could be fear of retaliation, where bullies threaten a worse treatment, right? There could be a lot of shame, self-blame involved. They think that it's their fault. And sometimes reporting bullying can be hard because it feels like they're admitting and exposing themselves to some kind of uncomfortable dynamic, right? And again, a lot of this can be microaggressions and they can be very hard to recognize. So beyond just what happens at home, there's also these things to also consider. So yeah, I think trust at home is important, but that being said, it cannot be the only safety net, right? Schools are primed, just by proximity, by the amount of time students spend there, right? They have the potential to be that as well.
Right. Well, according to the Straits Times, citing experts here, social factors like peer pressure may push people to bully others to gain acceptance or show dominance, and others may have grown up in a violent household, and they are more likely to mimic such behaviors. So, Shan, parents are a child's first support system from birth, and values start at home, especially what you said earlier. But what about students whose home environments are broken or even abusive? In those cases, isn't the school the only space where intervention can actually happen?
Yeah, we hope that, by the time, the child goes to a school, there's already quite a good supportive system where, maybe things that are lacking or support systems that are lacking in a home context can be compensated for by adults in school, for example, or even community, right, social service. I think it's really important, especially, for children, students, to feel that they have some modeling, a good role model to look up to for, building healthy relationship. And at the same time, when things go unmanageable or challenging social situations, they can have somebody to rely on for counsel, for advice, and for support. I think that is important. Teachers may feel that role, school counselors may feel that role, but I also feel that the wider community can also play the mentorship role.
Right. I think we've got some great perspective from both of you here. So to kind of wrap up our conversation here, countering bullying may require a collective effort, and I think both of you guys have mentioned it as well. Schools, the parents of both the victim and the bully and the students themselves, they all kind of need to work together to address the issue swiftly and effectively. But what more should be done here? Can bullying ever be eliminated entirely? Let's take South Korea for an example here. I believe South Korea is kind of known. We've seen a lot of K-dramas out there about school bullying. There have been cases where celebrities have been accused of being bullies back in school. But, South Korea is taking action here. All bullying records are kept up for 4 years after graduation, according to a new move. College applications starting from 2025 will also have a submission form to include school bullying records. Starting from 2026, this submission of past bullying records will be mandatory. So should Singapore be exploring the same? What else can we do here? So Colin, maybe we can start with your thoughts.
Right. So I think to even, think about beginning to start exploring these things, I think it's important again to reframe this conversation about bullies. Instead of asking what is wrong with this student, right? Maybe what we should ask is what has happened to this student that makes them feel like the only way to be seen, to be heard, to have control is to hurt someone else, right? I think only then we can start to look at interventions, from the communities, right? So punitive measures alone, like suspension, they might remove the immediate problem from the classroom, but they rarely address the root cause, right? So in fact, they can isolate the bully even further, exposing them to unstable or even harmful environments at home. And then also, can suspension look more like a rehabilitation for these perpetrators, right? Can they still come to school, but instead of joining the class, they work on behavioral changes, empathy and perspective taking, learn to take accountability for their actions, and maybe also get a chance to make amends through repairing relationships. And on the other side, let's not forget the victims as well, right? So they deserve more than just protection. They also deserve a chance to heal. I think that's where perhaps restorative justice can come in and, help the victim reclaim the power, right? Be heard. And if appropriate, maybe participate in the process where that relationship can be healed, right? And restoring that sense of agency for the victim as well. I think ultimately what I'm trying to say is that if bullying is a community issue, then the solution probably lies with the community.
Right. Shan?
Yeah, I mean, this is interesting, right? We always think about consequences on the bullies, but I think it's a refreshing perspective, right? When we think about how to support victims, but at the same time, for students to be aggressive in the school context, sometimes it may be something that they have learned in the past. It has proven to be working and adaptive. So rather than accusing them or penalizing them for such behaviors, what can we do that comes from an angle of love and empathy, right? To support these students such that they would learn more adaptive ways to interact with others, right? To seek resources without having to use aggression. So I think a lot more needs to be done beyond just disciplinary actions, but really for the whole community to know from both sides that, for someone to come into a social situation with aggression, it means something, right? It means that there is some form of attachment relationship history that needs working through. So are we able to provide that kind of support and understanding as a community? I think that is more important.
Right. Well, thank you so much both for joining me today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. We've been speaking to Colin Toh, who's a counselor from Nook Counselling and Therapy, and Assistant Professor Shan, who is from the National Institute of Education's Psychology and Child and Human Development. Now, before we end off, here's a public service announcement. If you're struggling with someone who uses power, position, strength, or popularity to degrade and belittle you, you're a victim of bullying. Now, if you're being bullied at home, school, work, or online, you're not alone. There are 2 helplines in Singapore provided by people who understand how lonely you feel. Tinkle Friend is a national toll-free helpline and chat line for all primary school-aged children in Singapore. You may call the helpline at 1-800-2744-788 or contact the Samaritans of Singapore. They have a 24-hour hotline at 1767 or 24-hour care text at 9151-1767. That's 9151-1767, and you can text them via WhatsApp. Now, this has been the Hot Seat, where it's not just about winning an argument, but about understanding the complex layers that underpin today's hottest topics. I've been your host, Hongbin Jeong.
To listen to more great interviews, download our podcasts at audio.sg or download the audio app. That's AWEDIO, audio at the App Store and Google Play.